pushed all the video buttons this time. So welcome to Quarkus Insights 140. We're going to do something a little bit different this time. Instead of diving into a specific technical topic with one person, we really wanted to think a bit more and give a bit of guidance about how to contribute to Quarkus and how to get started with the Quarkus code base. So what we started with was, well, who are some contributors who are doing really awesome things, and let's invite them on. Let's get them to tell their story, share their tips for success, that kind of thing. And so with that, I think we just get started with the introductions. So we've got a mix here of Red Hatters and non-Red Hatters. So I'm Holly Cummins. I'm a regular host of Quarkus Insights. Max, do you want to go next?
Sure, I'm Max, and the other non-regular or regular host of there. Yeah, I work on at Red Hat, and I co-lead Quarkus, and I've been 2 weeks on conferences, so I don't know anything today. And yeah, that's me.
And Clément?
Hello, I'm sometimes coming to the inside, not so much this day. So today I'm substitutions, and we are going to talk about that later. It's one of the hard part when you are building an extension.
I got that one. That was a good one. Yes.
And Loïc?
Hello, I'm Loïc Mathieu. I work as a lead software engineer at Kestra. We built an orchestrator to orchestrate, schedule, and automate different workflows. And I'm a regular contributor to Quarkus, multiple extensions inside Quarkus core. And lately, I mostly contribute to a pack of extension around Google Cloud Services that is in the Quarkus. I think we will discuss also core extensions in Quarkus later.
Cool, thank you. And Emil?
Hi, my name's it's Emil.
Emil, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Emil's French. Emil, my parents must be Eastern European. So I am Chief Technology Officer of a small consulting firm outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in the United States. We focus mostly on Java, and I got involved in the Quarkus community mostly on the UI aspects, all the JSF extensions, and as well as quinoa. I actually started to write my own quinoa because I didn't know there was one. And then once I found that, just because I didn't know the name of it, but it's way better than what I was going to build.
Although it does have a sort of, while we're on the subject of, things that nobody can pronounce, then yes. Quinoa is like right up there.
I tried to talk them into renaming it Quarkus Node, so people will be like, "Oh, I get it. It's Node.js based," but we'll see.
We'll see. Yeah, and how about you, Antonio?
Hi, my name is Antonio Goncalves. I'm a principal software engineer at Microsoft, but that was only 2 years ago. But because I started contributing to Quarkus at a very early stage with workshops and documentation and samples. But since then, I've also did some contributions in the Azure extension, so Microsoft Azure and other ideas. So yeah, been contributing to Quarkus for a few years as a contractor and now as a Microsoft employee.
Cool. And before we go further as well, actually, we should get all of our apologies in because we're all having sort of mechanical problems. So Max's microphone may flake out at any moment. My voice may flake out at any moment, even though the microphone continues going. Antonio seems to have some sort of weird noise that appears and disappears. And if Clément waves his hands too much, then his screen gets filled with like balloons or disco balls or anything because computers were a bad idea. So I think, if it all goes wrong, then Emil and Loïc, it'll just be you two on your own. But that's the open source model, right?
It's all goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just before I just highlight, people listening in, ask any questions away. If it's going to be too technical, we'll probably hey, put that on. Say go ask the community. But if you have any question about how to contribute and where to start, or any idea, yeah, let's have them and we'll discuss them. So, yeah. So where do we want to start?
I guess, I mean, I think we sort of covered this a little bit in the introduction, but maybe it'd be useful just to sort of go around a bit with how long each of us have been contributing to Quarkus. I think we're all sort of fairly long-standing contributors, and I think I might be the newest.
I think I'm the
because
newest.
oh, are you?
I think so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's what year did you start? How many
Last year.
t-shirts? How many
I only have
t-shirts
one
do you
T-shirt.
Okay. All right. Who have only one t-shirt? Holly, you
I only have one.
I've only got one T-shirt.
See, yeah, okay. And who got two? Who got three? Yeah. Loïc, you have none? Oh, okay.
Oh,
Right.
well, there was only 3 t-shirts.
Yeah, because I have the very first Quarkus T-shirt before they changed the blue color that Emmanuel Bernard gave me at Devox
The
2019.
Yeah, the first one. So I have 4 too. So that was the
Yeah.
very, very first T-shirt, but it doesn't count. It's
Okay. So, yeah, because I have more than that, in fact. There is the Quarkus Tour T-shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So
So I think we've got our first question, which is
how we could contribute.
yeah, how would you recommend that well, first of all, what would you recommend people contribute to, and how would you recommend they get started? And maybe let's start with you, Emil, since you're sort of newest, so it's freshest in your mind.
Yeah, no problem. I do a lot of work on the JSF side for like prime faces. I've been in the open source world for a long time, so I know what a good contributor looks like and what a troll looks like when somebody just wants to complain about a bug and not help. So I always find that people starting out, even just helping with like documentation or, hey, there's a spelling mistake here, like anything helps the community to start. And you get your feet wet with those, and you build trust a little bit more and more with maybe a slightly harder bug than a documentation issue or things like that. And then when you get that level, like for quinoa, for example, like I picked a really hard one, which was getting the hot module reloading working, because I really like I really like to be able to just work in the environment and have it hot reload just like you could do on the Java side. And Andy, who's the lead on that, has been great as far as somebody on the Quarkus side who's been great about code reviews and suggestions and how to get better. And then he'll even help me with my PRs, and we'll kind of co-program them together. So that's how I got started. And then when I did the JSF extension for prime faces and omni faces, I had some questions, and I guess it's George. I don't know how to pronounce. Is it Gastaldi? He's great for chiming in on how to do the things the right way. And he really helped me get those extensions off the ground. And since then, they've kind of picked up pace where I'm getting questions from people all over about, well, hey, I want to convert from a full JBoss EE container to a Quarkus container. So it's just kind of grown from there.
Max has carefully flipped his video feed so that he's got the troll the right way around. It's that attention to detail.
Well, Eric helped me saying that it appeared backwards.
Yeah.
So, Emil, I think you give a good point. Is that well, people have to remember Quarkus is a big project, but any kind of contribution helps, right? So, and I'll just kind of mention some that might people don't see as contributions, but participating in the discussions that is on or a Stack Overflow, giving responses to ideas, even if do try, even if you think maybe I don't have the full answer, but just getting something out there is a good one. Documentations is another. Third is the one I always tell people, like, let us know what's missing in learning stuff. One way we try and fix things, but it doesn't always work, but like for example, when Holly came on the team, I said, "Hey, like you go start working on this." I forgot what one we started on, but anything you find, just open PRs against the docs to improve the getting started experience. Because the problem is those who have 2, 3, 4, 5 t-shirts, how much it is they forget, oh, we changed this thing since we last wrote it. And it's the newcomers who don't notice it. And actually the newcomers are the best one to actually explain it, because they are now they've learned that thing and go like, okay, how would you explain that to the next guy or girl?
Yeah, when I started, I remember I was going through the contributing.md. So that, that's
Yeah.
sort of a good starting point is in the GitHub repo. There's, a document. So I started going through the instructions on how to check it out, how to build it. And then it kept not working. And so I kept sort of, raising questions saying, oh, I did this. And then everybody would come back and say, oh, no, of course, we don't do that. Well, but it's written in the document.
Yeah.
But of course, documents are really hard to keep up to date.
Yeah.
So you need new people to be going through, making the dumb mistakes that everybody else knows are dumb except for the document. And then that's how you get the improvement.
And the other thing is also like Quarkus. We have, well, maybe we should have had a drawing on this, but we have the main repository called Quarkus.io, which is a mono repo that's probably gotten too big, but we don't dare touch it right now. We want to, but it's hard. That one is definitely might be a tricky thing to actually import and get everything in it. But I just want to remind people there is we have the Quarkiverse where we have these extensions that are all kind of extensions, and they are, I think, the best place for people to start is to find some extension or area they're interested in, and just because then that repository only talks about, let's say, semantic kernel, or it only talks about CXF, is that what you want to do, and therefore it's easier to get started with. And also those repositories were built after 2-3 years of us, oh, this is how you want to build an extension. Whereas Quarkus core has old leftovers of bad ways of doing things that we learned, oh, we should do that differently. So now, but like Loïc, I know you wrote a blog at some point about getting started. I think the last Oktoberfest or 2 years ago, I can't remember. Maybe
yes, it was 2 years ago for Oktoberfest. I'm not sure it's still relevant for all parts, but it explains how to start contributing. Usually, I said the easiest part of Quarkus to start contributing with is the documentation, or some small improvements on extensions you know very well, on extensions you use every day. Because if you want to start to contribute, for example, MongoDB with Panache, like I did more than 2 years ago, be prepared to have a very long phase of design of the extension. Be prepared to try to understand everything that Quarkus internals, and so it's really complicated. So it's really easier to just start contributing very small pull requests on areas that you use every day. And I contributed to multiple frameworks. Quarkus was the project I contributed the most. But what I want to say is that the Quarkus code base is very understandable. It's very important because when you read the code, usually you understand it, and you don't have to climb up hierarchies of 10 interfaces. You don't have to go to 5 or 6 support classes to find the piece of code that runs your application. So the Quarkus code base is really easy to read, except for some parts that are specific to native, like substitutions. But if you're on more normal, I would say, areas of the code, it's really easy to read. So for me, it was more easy to contribute to Quarkus than other frameworks. So it's very important to say it.
And I think Yeah, so Holly and me had a fun experience last week at Devox. At least I can't remember you were there, but there was a person come up to me and say, "Hey, I understand how to do Quarkus extension, but when I go into Quarkus core, I get lost." And we do have the how to there's a contribution guide and there's which explains like the mechanics on how to import the project and get started. But then we also have like how to write your first extension, which I think is fairly good. I'm not perfect, but we can always improve. But
It's good.
But I think we do miss this piece of documentation that says, okay, now you want to understand how a build item actually gets applied and how that flows through. And that is something that I think we're missing. And so if anyone out there wants to go through and learn how these things work and write that doc, that'll be an excellent first contribution guide. But yeah, that information is missing. So that when you say that the code is simple, I do agree with you that the code in Quarkus tend to be simple, but I also think that it's hard to understand some parts of it if you're kind of missing those conversations. And I think we like all those who have more than one T-shirt, those have been discussed like in person or in chats or somewhere. We could actually use hey, this is how it actually works.
Contributing to an extension, it's easy. When I say that the code is easy to read, it's for extension. If you try to contribute to the core, and there's some areas that are very complicated, and it's normal because it does complicated stuff. But on an extension, it's really it's not that complicated.
I will say, since I've just been doing a lot of new extensions recently, I thought the documentation was great, like getting the extension started. And then once in a while, I would hit something where I would keep running in native mode over and over again until I'd hit something that says, hey, I can't find this class. And I would just write on the dev mailing list, like, I've got this problem where I've got this super class that I need all of those. And somebody would say, oh, this extension does the same thing. And I would be able to basically steal that snippet for the substitutions you just slowly that's how I did it anyway, because the faces world is pretty large. So hitting every scenario is really difficult for native mode. But I've just had users report in like, hey, I'm doing this and the PDF won't render because it's saying can't find this. And then that's why I added the Quarkus iText extension, because it was a really simple extension, but it just needs, some additional things that aren't included automatically in native mode. But there was a need that came out of a bug. And that's kind of how I've done it. But I thought the documentation's great. And the dev team, at least answering hey, I've got this weird one-off, how do I fix it? They'll, at least giving me a hint or an area to look at has been really helpful.
So maybe to summarize, we started by your first contribution should be doc or relatively simple thing, test and things like that, or guides. We quickly went to, hey, build your own extension. And then we went to, hey, don't contribute to the core extensions because these ones are complicated. So there is a kind of a ramp here. Writing your own extensions, you need to have a need. You don't do an extension for doing an extension. That won't work. And before doing an extension, you will need to understand a little bit how Quarkus works, build time, runtime, and all this stuff. Building an extension is basically using Quarkus as a framework to build an extension. And there are cases which can be quite hard because an extension is integrating something most of the time. It will take this something and try to make it more build time. So you will have to understand what you can do at build time, what you can do at runtime. The trade-off. And it's not that simple. Even for the core extension, we are thinking, that we push that at build time, but it actually should be a runtime thing. That should be a build time. So we continuously change that. So it's not something simple. And another goal of the extension is to build native. And then, that can be really hard because the library you try to integrate may just not work in native because it does weird things. It choose some other native libraries, or there is plenty of reason why native doesn't really work. Another thing that can be daunting at first when you build your own extension is everything we do with generated bytecode. If you look inside Quarkus core, you will find that most of our extensions, for one reason or another, love to generate bytecode. Well, we are just geek. That's the only reason that I can't say why we are always doing this. So it's not a must. So that's something we need to clarify. You can't write an extension without having to generate your own bytecode. And in general, it's probably best.
Yeah. Well, let's just, on that one, just to explain, the reason why we do generate bytecode is part of the whole thing of removing need for reflection and other things. But also another one, which because I also like, why don't we just generate source code instead? That's easier to read, that kind of thing. But the main reason there is that then it becomes harder to integrate with stuff like Kotlin and other languages. The bytecode is like a universal one. So yeah,
except for humans.
Universal, but humans.
Yeah, right. So anyway, but 100% agree with you. Like, to get started on something in Quarkus, it's much easier if you have an itch or you have a need. Like, oh, I need this extension. Sorry, this library. If I add this to Quarkus, I no longer compile natively. Okay, write an extension. Or, hey, I have this extension. This library. It works fine, but it wouldn't be cool if I can do this thing in dev mode? Or, hey, I have this extension, but why is it taking so long to start up compared to everything else? Oh, let's write an extension, right? And we had a lot of people asking, like, how do I contribute? And it's like a bit of meta, like, have need, and either on the extension or on understanding documentation for Quarkus or that kind of thing. It's very hard to come into a project, especially Quarkus, to see like, I don't have a need, but I like to contribute to Quarkus.
I like your idea of the itch, because I sometimes talk about pain-driven development, where it's with either the docs or the implementation. It's the things that hurt you are the things that you're going to be able to fix. But that's kind of a bit of a gruesome idea. So itch-driven development, probably better.
Yeah.
But I think what I found difficult with writing extensions is you don't know what to do, to be honest, because if you try to integrate an external library, well, you go to your Quarkus project, add it in your POM XML, and it works. It always works. So you go, why would I create an extension? And then you go, oh, because I want to build it to native. And as Clément said, well, that's difficult. Oh, it's because I want to optimize it. Build time. Yes, but how do I know it's fully optimized? I was hoping that I will go Maven, Quarkus extension, give me my metrics, and go, oh, you're 97% optimized. So there is this thing where you can take any external library and it will always work in Quarkus. And then you go, why would I create an extension? And because of all these reasons, to make it faster, to use external services like dev services, test containers, the central configuration, the native mode, but all that is, it's.
Yeah, it's interesting what you just said. Usually, when someone asks me this question, I say, you want an extension if you want to have your configuration in the central configuration place in the Quarkus configuration file. When you want to have a way to inject a service, inject a bin, for example, if you create an extension to support some kind of object storage, you will want to have the client to the object storage injected, and to provide native support if the extension is not compatible to native. So this is, for me, the three main reasons why you want to create an extension, and you can use you can have your configuration inside the Quarkus main configuration file. You can have CDI beans, and you can have native support without an extension. So yeah, it's always a choice. And usually when you have an extension inside Quarkus, it's in order not everybody to do the same integration. But it's fun because a few months ago, no, 2 years ago, I wrote an article how not to create a Quarkus extension that explained how to integrate technology inside the configuration file as a CDI bean, and maybe deal with some native, but without creating an extension.
It's
but
actually
for complex use case, you need an extension for generating bytecode for proxies, for example.
It's actually a great thing you just mentioned. Like, I want to create an extension to have a managed client for some technology. By manage, you say, okay, I want to inject it, and is a usability great, but you also need to think about, what about metrics? What about health? What about how does that work with observability, with my observability stack, so tracing and so on. And your simple bean that is just injected can start to be a little bit more complicated. Like, there is health. Typically, health is a great example. Like, health is enabled, so I have the health capability. So I want to report some health status. So when the application is running, my extension can say whether it's everything is fine or something is broken. Same thing for the metrics. Like, think about that, and the fact that you can package everything in one extension, like having a really nice managed client. I think it's great. It's what makes it's a big difference between I can just use a library and instantiate it and do everything, to have something like the configuration is documented, because when you do an extension, you will have a documentation, a configuration framework, so the documentation is well written and so on. It's part of it, and then you go to the managed ID of your clients, and then you start thinking about graceful shutdown and things like that. And yeah, it's a journey. It's actually longer than what people expect.
I like you go from writing docs to and then graceful shutdowns. It's like, okay.
Well, that's the next step, right?
I will say though, for contributors, like, even if somebody just reports like, hey, I'm using your extension and I'm doing this specific thing and it doesn't work in native mode, that's something, maybe it's a feature I've never used because it's a large ecosystem or a large library that I've wrapped. And I'll say, okay, and if they provide a test case, then it's like, okay, you're right, it doesn't work in native mode. I need to figure out what substitutions I need to do. But once I do that, then you're wrapping it up for the community, right? Like, the whole point of the extensions is to prevent people from reinventing the wheel and, I know this works, or I've seen people have this thing. I've had this on my own project for years. I'm like, well, why didn't you donate it? Other people are going to run into the same problem. And that's why I love the extensions Quarkiverse. Like, it's basically helping other users not, reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Go ahead, Holly.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that sort of ties quite nicely to the comment that we've just had, that you write the extension and you go, yeah, I'm done. And then you realize that you're not at all done, and people just keep asking for things. But that's kind of a good thing, because it means people are using it. But then as well, of course, then hopefully it gets fed forward. So, your contribution then leads other people in to contribute. And then, you're going to be getting PRs on your extension, and then it just grows from there.
Good.
One way to contribute, and I keep repeating that almost several times a day. One way to contribute, even if it doesn't count in terms of numbers, is opening issues, providing reproducers, and opening a discussions to, maybe it's a question or something like that, but filling inside the discussion. These three things are amazing because you're already building the community with that. Opening an issues just with a random description without a reproducers, it's going to be very hard for any developer to just say, something is wrong and I want to go there. So just the fact that you provide a nice description, a small reproducers, then someone will have a look, will explain the issues, because they generally do that, say, how I found the issue is this, and then we can have a discussion. Maybe we can even fix it once the issues is found.
And maybe even
At
Google
least
or the AI
test.
can find it afterwards. Oh, sorry.
No, and also testing the PR. I've done that. I create an issue. It's way too complex for me. I give the reproducer and so on, and then the PR is created, and testing it is a nice feedback too.
Oh yeah, yes, especially because sometimes we are not completely sure we fix it. So having someone testing it is amazing.
And even commenting on other people's issues is actually really useful, because we have a lot of open issues. We would love to fix them all, but resources are finite, and so we have to prioritize. And so if we can see that people keep hitting an issue, then that helps us prioritize. So what seems like just one small comment is actually really useful input for the whole community.
There are emojis now on GitHub issues, so you can say that and that quickly, because my camera is going to pick this, but
oh no, show us, it's so cool, in a ridiculous kind of way.
Something.
I just want to touch on this one. What DB Singh says about like when you publish something, people start asking for more. At least that's one way of reading this, right? And I think Quarkus has there's a general like open source education here that just because you made something available, and you might, if it's popular and you get a lot of requests, doesn't mean you have to do them. So that's just one thing. I don't want people to burn out on this. It's perfectly okay to say to someone who shows up and say, "Hey, I did this extension. I tried it out, but this feature doesn't work." Well, it's perfectly okay at least to ask for a reproducer. It's also perfectly okay to say, "Hey, I can confirm that fails. I don't have time to look at it right now, but look over here." And then that person on the other side might go and fix it for you. And then you have another contributor, and then you kind of grow from there. That's one angle of that question. Another one is, in Quarkus, we are actually encouraging people to not add all features in that library and make it available to them. A good example is we have good Hibernate support in Quarkus, but we don't let the user of the Hibernate, we don't expose all the features of Hibernate. And those features I talk about is like, we gonna want to have bytecode enhanced entities by default, right? Because we know that's gonna matter in startup time. So turning that off is hard in Quarkus. Whereas if you use Hibernate standalone, you can turn it on or off as you want to. But we are saying, no, we want to have it bytecode generated, because then we can make other assumptions in the rest of the extension that gets things optimized. Similar, I think we have examples from like, what's it called? The database migration tools? I don't know what.
Liquibase and Flyway.
Yeah, where some of the flexibility it can do, we just saying, hey, if we add that in, the startup time is just going to be killer for our dev mode and our production. Not a thing that we like to do. And mind you, some of them we add in also, like we have the build time config and runtime config. We put build time there because then we can strip out code at runtime. But we've also learned over time, like sometimes we are a bit too harsh, and then we let someone come up and say, "Hey, we need a runtime for X, Y, Z reason," and then we might add it. Or we ask them, or we add another property to let. So it's just adding a support from the library in Quarkus. Also, we try to encourage people to take a fresh look at what this library does, and rethink how this should work in a supersonic subatomic way. Right? That we are not encouraging everything to work as it did in the past, because the way we did things in the past was why we had we have certain parts of Java that's slow.
What you say is very interesting in the sense that an extension can be seen as an opinion for a library. Like it provides a subset of the features that we believe make sense, or at least the owner, the contributor believes that that's the main ones. That's how it should work in a Quarkus context. And that's a big thing. You mentioned Hibernate, but the same thing for native, the same thing for Vertex. There are options we just disable, don't support them. Like, nope, does not make sense.
And by the way, this is another conversation that comes up. Why is every property we have prefixed with Quarkus? There are reasons, but one of them is we don't necessarily want to expose all the properties. Like you could have like, oh, we could just read all the Hibernate dot properties and put that in. For some libraries that makes sense, but in general we say, hey, put the naming on the Quarkus dot something, and that is again another encouragement to just not support everything from day one. And that takes we've had like every, I don't know, 3 or 6 months someone comes in like, why don't you support that key, or why haven't we added that key? And it's like, well, because no one thought about it, or because there was a feature we didn't that cost something. So anyway, we're not trying to be everything for everybody. And that is hard sometimes, but also liberating, at least for some extension writers. Like these features aren't.
Well, we didn't talk much about Quarkiverse. I think writing an extension to a certain level of maturity. We talked about native compilation, blah blah blah. But Quarkiverse is really nice, meaning that if you know how an extension works and you want to write, a first phase of your extension, instead of doing it your way and trying to push it to Maven Central and trying this and trying that, you go to Quarkiverse, and that is fantastic. Quarkiverse is really the hidden gem of Quarkus, because they look after everything. It's just they give you the repo, of course, and you write the documentation the way they want, and you follow a couple of rules, and then everything is automated. So that's actually nice, because once is having the idea of an extension, then it's writing the extension and releasing it, which can be cumbersome. So Quarkiverse is really nice for that. A very good initiative.
I agree. I have an extension that was written by another developer, but he was maintaining it in his own GitHub, and he was just having trouble keeping up to date with it, as lone developers do. But by moving it to Quarkiverse, now the builds are automated, the deployment, like there's no like, hey, can you release this to Maven Central? I really need this bug you fixed. Now you can fix a bug and do a deployment in, short amount of time if it's a critical bug, and not have to worry about the mechanics of Maven Central, et cetera. That's a really good point. I do really, of all the projects I work on, I think the Quarkiverse stuff is set up the best of the ones I've used.
On the Quarkiverse, there is two kind of extensions. There is what I want to say standard extensions, so extensions that are in the Quarkiverse and you can use. And there is also extensions that are integrating into the platform. When you have an extension in the Quarkiverse that is integrating into the Quarkus extension, it's almost as if it's in the core repository. So, but there is some specific CI that runs to check that your extension is okay. But this brings also a lot of other challenges, because, for example, I have a big extension pack in the Quarkiverse. I am the author and maintainer of everything Google Cloud related, and it's a little more complex, because when you have shared dependencies between an extension in the core and an extension in the Quarkiverse, there is sometimes some diversions, and there is convergence issue, and there is some challenge to make everything works. And when your extension is in the core, is in the Quarkiverse, depends on the core, and used by another Quarkiverse extension, it can start to be very difficult.
You mentioned one thing super important here. So first, as a consumer, as a regular consumer, you don't consume Quarkus Core. You consume the Quarkus platform, which is composed by the extension of Quarkus Core, but also others, including some from the Quarkiverse. So if your goal is to write an extension and be sure to be used and so on, then you can be part of the platform and all the users will be able to use that. However, great powers come with great responsibilities, as I would say, as a philosopher would say. You need to be sure it runs on the very latest version of Quarkus. So we have CIs that verify that. And it's actually very helpful for us, because sometimes it happens to me not so long ago, like last week, I broke something. It was working perfectly in Quarkus core, but I broke a couple of Quarkiverse extensions. And without that, I would not have been aware of it, or after the release, which would have been too late. So I was able to fix it very quickly by saying, "Oh yeah, I messed up." So that's great. But when you start contributing, your first extensions, maybe the platform is the next step. Like start with your extension, it works, and say, "Hey, actually, I want to distribute it as part of the platform," and then we can add it. And there is some onboarding things to do, but then you're distributed as the rest of Quarkus, which is great in the sense that you are in the same flow.
Well, I'll say so. When we designed Quarkus, it feels like 2 years ago. Well, a long time ago. The main thing was what Antonio talked about, like, hey, just getting over the burden. Like, hey, you have an idea to do an extension, but all the practical stuff like publish maybe in central, like many people might not even have done it before. And we just kind of want to remove that burden. So that was the main thing. Then the other one was like, oh, it'd be kind of like a breeding ground for stuff that into the platform, into core, which it still is. But sorry, full correct. But stop calling me. The big one is what I was gonna say. Yeah, it's make it easy to main publish. The other one was like a breeding ground into platform, because we thought that would be the way to do one thing. But what actually came along was this, that hey, we also wanted to encourage other people to make extensions. Like, for example, Antonio is from Microsoft, and we've had other companies that work with us, and they historically had stuff in their repositories, which you, by the way, can still do if you want to own all this stuff for maintenance and CI. But there's no requirement to be in the Quarkus hub at all to do this. But what it turns out is, like, it's actually a very practical solution, that there's a repository where people from that user space or company can work with the Quarkus team, because then if something goes wrong, there's just more people that can help. And we all have the same way of releasing, and then suddenly, oh, I've done work on this extension, I can go and work on this other extension, and you can contribute more and more. And that was I think that was something underestimated, how big an impact Quarkus would have. So I thought we would have a problem attracting people from companies doing it, but that actually solves the problem, because now they don't have to go ask for creating extension or publishing. It's just done for them. So yeah, no, it's good, and we can definitely do more.
And as Clément said, then you can contribute to Quarkus Core, which I've never done, to be honest. I've created issues, I've replied to issues, I've tested PRs and everything, but I never created a PR and merged the PR in Quarkus Core. But there is when you go to Quarkus Core, you have the good first issue tag, and there's a few issues that are tagged for people to start contributing in the core, which is a nice way. I like these tags, good first issue. You never know, you might be lucky, you understand what the issue is about, and actually submit a PR for it.
I'll also say, for contributing, one of the other things, I think some people are intimidated submitting a PR. It's almost like turning in your homework and afraid the professor's going to say something you don't like. So what I've seen a lot is somebody will say, hey, I fixed this locally. They'll post what they fixed in the comment of the issue. And I'll be like, why don't you just submit a PR and then you get dead silence? So then I'll just open a PR with their fix because I know it's the right fix, but at least they donated that. Like that's still contributing, even if you're afraid to submit a PR. If you've got a fix or even a suggestion of a fix, like that's even helpful in the tickets, at least for devs. Like
I think
that was specifically a Liquibase issue.
that brings me to, we've been talking a lot about Quarkiverse and extensions and GitHub and issues, but I think that brings me to the core of the Quarkus community. The Quarkus team is really welcoming, and not because they, I know a bunch and ask them to pay me a beer, but if you are in this industry for a long, long time, you might remember the RTFM hashtag, which was used by a few people who I would not name. It's the opposite. First of all, if like me, you hate Slack and Discord, they actually use Zulip, which is way more clever than Slack and Discord. So interacting with the core team with Zulip is amazing. You always get an answer. There's also the mailing list. There's also GitHub. But Red Hat is a funny company where actually the engineers are also DevRels, and they go to conferences, and you can actually meet them and talk to them. And not just long ago, last week, I was at DevOps Belgium with a few Red Hatters, a few Quarkus committers, and I spent 1 hour talking about an extension. What about this? What about that? So it's also nice. It's not like most of the companies where you have the DevRels on one side showing up on stage and the engineering team on the basement with no light and you don't see them. Actually, Red Hat has a different policy. So the engineering team is quite accessible, and you see them on Zulip, you see them on GitHub, and you see them in real. So yeah, I would like to actually thank the Quarkus team because most of the people are really welcoming.
I couldn't agree
now
more.
You all owe me a beer.
I've noticed another thing about the sort of the mode of interaction on PRs as well, because I think you can, sometimes you get the sort of the PR where it's, someone submits it and then someone comes back and they're like, oh, well, you've missed a semicolon on line 6. And, it's just sort of pushing back. And quite often on certainly on my PRs, I will have those stupid little issues. And so someone will come in and say, oh, look, this is wrong. Here, I fixed it for you. So it gets to more sort of a collaborative async pair programming style rather than let me show you how much more I know than you, which is just doesn't help the community and doesn't help anybody.
Holly, that's a great point. On Quinoa, Andy, who I've never met in person or even talked to, he's great. And a lot of times he'll ask me to start a PR and I'll get like all the foundations of it there and it's working. And then he'll say, hey, I merged it, but then I made some changes to make it a little bit better, because he knows the code base inside and out. And I'm totally happy with that versus us going back and forth 15 times, having me try and fix, every comment he makes. He's like, hey, you got the gist of this PR down. I'm just going to fine tune it a little bit. And I really like that model too.
Yeah,
because we all have day jobs too.
Yeah, it's really amazing to be able to get in touch with the development team so easier. And when someone asks me about contribution experience, I say, okay, you can just go to Zulip because this is really where most of the team is. And you ask a question, and usually somebody will answer in tens of minutes, not a lot, not more. And there are so many nice people. I know someone that can explain, reactive works almost each month in Zulip, and always with with a lot of kindness and always with technical details. And it's really at a great value.
Oh.
Yeah, I ran into an issue on Friday that there was a 2-year-old Zulip conversation on because I checked Zulip and I responded. I said, I'm really sorry for, opening a 2-year-old conversation, but I have the exact same issue this user does. And you're right. A Red Hatter got right back and said, you're right. This is still an issue. And we opened a ticket and But usually on other projects, they'll yell at you for, why are you answering a 2-year-old forum post, or have you tried the latest code, or all the standard answers you normally get.
Yeah. I'm sure that will also happen. Depends on what the issue is. But yeah, I think people are underestimating, or at least I feel like, and this is not Quarkus specific, but just general, like just having someone asking the question or give a comment in a different way than happened, well, a month ago, a year ago, or an hour ago, helps. And what you said, Emil, about hey, you made a PR, you couldn't get completely there, but just getting that PR submitted and you give a context saying, hey, I tried my best. This is what we discussed on Sulip or whatever. I think this is where we're going, but for some reason this doesn't pass. That is so easy for someone who understands the core or that extension to comment on, compared to I can't get this to work. Please help. Right, like that. That's the art of contributing, is the art of being able to ask a question, right? And that means give context, and even that context might sound like, hey, everyone of course is running on Windows on this specific OS or this specific combination of dependencies, and just realize, no, everyone here is a snowflake. They have their own patch release of some Windows or Mac or Linux version, and they use 4 or 20 dependencies in their project, that just one of them is the one that makes a difference. That's the so don't be afraid like this. Yeah, I was saying, if you want to contribute, the best thing to do is give context and don't be afraid. There's no such thing as a stupid question, basically.
But I agree with what Ollie said. I think there is a cursor, unfortunately, between someone creating an issue and say, please fix that. Saying please is a plus. And
Yes.
and here is my PR, and someone bugging and telling you, no, this doesn't work, you should do this and read that, and after a few iterations you go, okay, forget about it. So there's also this cursor, and someone you have maintenance. That never happened to me on Quarkus, but in other projects, as Ollie said, it's really, I'm gonna show you how much more I know. It's like,
I am the gatekeeper, and I'm going to keep this gate.
Yeah.
Well, even one of mine was a real complex. It was a WebSocket problem and I'd gotten it 95% of the way there. And I said, I'm having this one issue. And then Andy helped out and said, yep, I see the issue. He ended up reaching out to somebody on the Vertex team, because it was like, even above, like, he was like, I need somebody else to look at this with us. And by the end, we got to the problem with all, like, so that's what's nice about having a Red Hat engineer looking at it. They can also reach out to their network on another, extension that's really where the root of the problem might be, or where we're missing something. So that to me is a huge advantage in the Red Hat engineers network.
Well, no doubt, but I think that's a good advantage for anything about open source, that we tend to write stuff in the public, and that means it's easy to share. Hey, we have Emil, he opened this issue over here. Let's say you were using some dependency of another Quarkus or Red Hat one. Just being able to share that link to someone somewhere else is a big win. And of course, in Red Hat we have a lot of connections, but the key part here is just to ask the question, like put it out there in public, make it available, and it might not be answered immediately. It might take, how long was it? 18 months before Emil pops by and say, hey, I saw the same issue, and then it gets answered. Yeah. But that's how the world improves.
I think I know another way of contributing. Many years ago, Clément and I and Emmanuel Bernard created a workshop that we've been updating for years and years and years. We gave it last week, actually. Ollie did some amazing contribution lately. And one way also to contribute to a project like Quarkus is telling other people outside this network, about Quarkus. We know that in the Java frameworks, history is a bit unbalanced. There's some Java frameworks, which I will not name, that have more GitHub stars and so on. So one way of contributing is also telling other people who don't know Quarkus, this is what Quarkus is. And one way of doing is also using some hands-on. You can also have some slides and watch some videos on YouTube. But there is a workshop on the Quarkus GitHub repository, really good. Not because I've created it. No, it's really good because it has been maintained for many, many years. It's a very follow it up. So what you can do is run it yourself, and if you find that it's good and it's a value, go and run it internally at your company or customers. It's also a nice way to um, advertise Quarkus, show what it can do.
And that workshop, of course, also accepts contributions, and they can be certainly a bit simpler than contributing to something like Quarkus Core. And Eric DeAndrea, who made a few comments, he pointed out as well that, so we've got the workshop, and we have a sort of a sample application, reference application that has a similar domain model. They're both superheroes. And that's also a really good place to contribute, where it's slightly less complicated code than some of the internals of the Quarkus class loading, for example.
Yeah, it forked. We started that workshop with Antonio and Emmanuel. That was Emmanuel ideas, and then Emmanuel disappeared. But after that, yeah, it kept evolving. The Quarkus 1.2 got a big rewrite, and then it forked. Eric said, "Hey, we need some kind of kitchen sink application or sample application," and it picked that ideas and it evolved in its own direction. So it's not the same application right now. Eric is showing way more different things than the workshop. It's not the same goal. But yes, you can contribute to both. More than welcome. Even typos or anything, it can be improved. And as Antonio said, write a demo, propose a talk to your local jugs. These are also contributions.
Yeah, and those actually, like, Quarkus is in a phase now where we have a lot of cool technology and enable a lot of projects and people to be successful. Yeah, the big thing now is to if you don't have a good, if there's something specific you can't contribute to, but sharing how you use Quarkus or how some specific corner of Quarkus works, or just ask a question about, like, do you use Quarkus somewhere, or give me that's a big help for us and for Quarkus in general.
So and the blog. We accept obviously blog posts. So you go on the Quarkus website. The contributing tips need to be rewritten, because for me they didn't work. I need to open a pull request there. Python.
Yeah.
So Python version obviously Python mismatch. But yes, we definitely want more blog posts. So if you have something you want to write about and don't necessarily have a blog setup, or don't want to use a blog platform, you publish on your own name and you can get it.
Yeah, there is an adopters page on the GitHub repo that lists all the adopters with user stories, and there is a user story category in the blog post. I already also wrote the user story of a big project I did more than 2 years ago. It's a good way to share your enthusiasm with Quarkus and to contribute to that.
And that's for those who are sitting in companies or products that are using Quarkus for like doing something interesting and cool, even if you consider it boring, it's a useful user story to say, hey, here's the reason why we use Quarkus, or and we encourage you to publish them either on your own blog or on Quarkus user story. And the good thing here, then you'll also meet the people who are going to review stuff, because we generally review them for, like, typos or just context, or just, hey, what's this one talking about? But in general, it's like 99% the user's story you want to get there. But you'll then realize how easy it is to open a PR and that we are not scary. And yeah, then that's the easy way to get in.
And I think we're just about out at time. We've had loads and loads of chat, which is really cool.
Yeah, we got one question we didn't answer. Just what was it? The one with the post vector thing.
Yeah, the one about the vectorized database.
Yeah,
and we didn't answer because I don't believe we have a good solution yet.
Actually, I faced that 2 weeks ago.
So this is I don't know about PG vector specifically, but we do have some vector databases, like Elasticsearch has a vector database, but I'm assuming Justician, or how you pronounce it, it's talk about like the more like AI focused vector semantic analysis, sorry, context, what was it called? Yeah. Anyway, user for AI.
I faced this issue actually. I faced this issue 2 weeks ago.
I don't think we have one specific, like the one I know about Elasticsearch that also works in native, but the one more generic, I haven't seen them, but that's a perfect valid thing to contribute. But I also do think many of them just will work because they are very, like in their core, it's fairly simple. So that it could just be working. But and I expect after last weeks of DevOps and seeing all the stuff that's going around and people talk about Quarkus and AI use cases, I'm sure we will see that in soon. But yeah, if someone has problems using one, go look at Elasticsearch. There's at least one example extension on how you integrate that kind of thing into Quarkus.
And more generally, to sort of browse all the extensions that there are to see if there's something, well, either to see if there's something that would be useful to you or to see if there's a gap. If you go to extensions.quarkus.io, then you can get a list of all of them and you can search and filter and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but sure. This one is a bit specific. I actually I couldn't do it with dev services and Quarkus because PG Vector is an external Postgre extension. So, and you have to enable it. So I just wrote a Docker file, that I use this Postgre, creates, initialize a SQL script that creates an extension, blah, 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 blah. Unfortunately, out of the box, it's not possible yet because it's external to Postgre, and dev containers with Postgre just uses the standard Postgre.
Can't you set the image name? Most of our dev services let you override the image name as soon as they are substitutable. Like for Redis, for example, I have plenty of variants because some have this module, and so on.
Good question. I looked into having Postgre image with PG Vector, but I didn't find it or didn't look too close, but I did it manually, which was a bit painful.
Yeah. But this is a good example of something that makes sense to discuss in a GitHub issue or a proposal. And then I'm sure we can find ideas on how to solve it, or if not, then if someone has the need, there's a way to either make a new extension or enhance an existing one.
Hey, by the way, an extension can just provide a dev service.
Yes,
that perfectly works. That's perfectly valid. If your extension core thing is just a dev service, it's already great because you can be sure it's going to be used.
A good example on that one because is, for example, ngrok. Ngrok is a service where it will make your own machine available to the internet. So don't do this at home. But that one is like, hey, I want to share my thing, and by just adding the Quarkus ngrok extension, it only kicks in at dev mode, and then it just exposes that thing, and then you off to the races. So you can definitely just do devy things in an extension.
It's itchy, so Antonio will create that dev service.
Yeah.
There's another one that's been on my list for a while that there's an open ticket for that I've commented on, but I just haven't gotten to it. Is a dev service for something like Mailhog, like a Mailhog container. Just because I like to test emails locally, and having it all captured in Mailhog is great before deploying for your customers and finding out that the emails don't look right.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's stable. The previous one I was using doesn't work on M1 because the container is so old that it doesn't work on ARM. And yes, having this will be so great. A
Awesome.
big
Yeah.
plus one.
Yeah. So Andrew Albright, you just go and open the extension proposal. By the way, yeah, if you go on GitHub Quarkus.io, open new issue. One of them is extension proposal. Put in Mailhawk, and it will explain how to do things. And yeah, and
then we should link back to the original Quarkus ticket where it talks about, like, I think 3 different mailer extensions were proposed, like Green Mail or Mailhog's my favorite just because it's already a container.
Yeah. So, and by the way, this is a nice thing about Quarkus that our Quarkus Hub is where on Quarkus Core we are very, let's call it, conservative on what we add in, at least in some perspective. In Quarkus, as long as it's like not illegal and doesn't break a license, you add anything in. So we could have both a Mailhawk, a Green Mail, and that kind of thing, and then whoever wins that battle and makes it more useful is the one that's gonna rise to the top, or they all coexist. So let's go. Definitely there. Cool. We'll be over time now. Yeah.
Clément, can you do a heart shapes? See if it creates a heart.
No, because
I'm
either I'm very bad or it doesn't work.
I wonder where is the balloons?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's sometimes I do this and there is balloons, but I didn't identify the gesture yet. So
Okay. Got it. It just happens. Awesome. Cool.
You can disable that feature, by the way, but
No.
initially I didn't know that it was something you can disable.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, thank you very, very much to Loïc and Antonio and Emil. It's been really useful.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It's nice seeing some faces behind tickets or answers that I'm getting on Zulip. So
That's okay. So, Emil, what extension are you working? Is that Quinoa or?
I work on Quinoa, Prime Faces, Omni Faces, iText, and I've done some stuff just helping out with Tika.
Okay, so a lot of the front end stuff.
Mostly front end stuff. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's actually worth noticing because I think for years we've been very much pushing on the back end, and that's still our main thing. But we are seeing stuff like, well, dev mode is one place, dev services, but also front end Quinoa and Node and ATMX. There's basically we cover the full range now. So
yeah, well, and especially because I came from a project that had been using JHipster, and I thought it was really cool to have a mono repo and have the microservices and the UI in one. And like I said, I started building my own because I didn't know to look for the word quinoa. I looked for like Quarkus Node, and then once I found it, I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And so I just started helping out there because it's a plugin or an extension I think is really, really handy, and I can do prototypes so fast with front end and back end both hot reloading at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. And by the way, that's the last 2 insights I think we've had. What's about the front end stuff. So that's cool. Awesome. Cool. So.
So we really should stop now.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.